want to talk to you about today is the role of AI in peer review. In order to do that, let's play a little game. Okay, I love games. Can you just close your eyes for a moment? Just close your eyes and imagine you've been invited to a dinner party in your local neighbourhood. A very good friends who invite you. There's going to be about 10 people at this dinner party, and you've all been asked to prepare a dish and bring it along. You've worked all afternoon preparing this, you knock on the door, you get into the house, you're greeted by the hosts, and open your eyes, place the food that you prepared on the dinner table. This is for 10 people. And then quickly talking to the other guests there, you realise actually of those 10 people, 5 of them, they're not even eating here. But they've done a solid, they've still brought 5 dishes for everyone else. They're off to another event. So this is Kai, right? This is our community. This is our problem. There is a massive scale problem here. We're overproducing, basically. And you can see that in the numbers. So here is Kai, the difference between 2019 and 2025, 1.7 increase in submissions. I'm not going to say what the reviewer load was for that, because throughout most of this time, Kai has promised to give every paper 3 reviews, or 2 reviews plus a 2AC. The numbers basically scale with the number of submissions. It's only recently they dared to talk about desk rejects as a policy, right? And that's coming, and it will be coming very shortly. I've been running IGHCS through this time period. We've seen over a 3-fold increase in submissions, a really big shock. And because I run that journal, I've got the back-end data, so I can tell you much more carefully and clearly what the reviewer load is. We've seen there is a greater load on reviewers, but the number of people reviewing is not keeping up with the number of people that are submitting. So there is a fundamental mismatch here. We are overproducing, and that is causing a problem. But that's not all, right? I mean, what I've seen in the last couple of years, since our favourite chatbots came along, large language models, is that authors are clearly using these. There are more people than ever producing more research, more submissions, greater volume, higher, well, they're producing it quicker, and they are producing it more rapidly and basically overloading the system with more submissions. Sometimes easier to read, sometimes not. And so the question then becomes, how do we respond to this in our peer review process in evaluating that work? Given that authors are clearly using these tools, and I think that's irrefutable, what's the role of using AI in the peer review process? And I know this is a thorny topic and one that people have very mixed views on, so that's why I'm putting it down here. In this paper that we're presenting on Tuesday, we looked at ICLR, which is a large AI conference, and there they grasped the nettle by the, I don't even know how to finish that phrase. There by the thorns, sounds right, doesn't it? There we go. So they introduced a process where they got all, basically, if you were a reviewer, let's say you reviewed this paper for their conference, you reviewed the paper as normal, you submitted it, and then after submission, your review was then ran through an AI tool. And what it did is it provided you feedback and gave you pointers for how to polish and improve that review, either telling you stuff that other people had picked up on, or probably most likely, those reviewer 2 harsh comments, helping you to smooth out the hostility and tones in how you're communicating your very elegant feedback to the reviewers, to the authors, sorry. What we did in this study was we talked to people who'd gone through this process, and a combination of surveys and interviews, and we found that many people said they were going to change their review after it had been completed upon getting that AI feedback, but then they actually didn't. Fewer of them actually then changed it. They thought they were going to, but then they just didn't go back. They carried on moving forward because they're all focusing on the next task. And critically, what we also picked up was that more experienced reviewers were less likely to take on board this feedback. They were just moving forward. Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of a bit obvious. Anyone who's got experience reviewing might be asking why this result is not surprising in many ways. Reviewing isn't just writing. It's not the same as drafting a paper. It's about forming a judgment, identity, and people are, let's say, reluctant to have feedback on their review once it's complete and go back to revisiting it. I mean, just think about this. I mean, I know this being a person who's ran the CHI subcommittee before, when we've had ACs or reviewers do slightly inappropriate reviews or reviews that are a bit like, shouldn't really say that, or can you, and then we ask the reviewer to polish it up, and they just don't, right? So if that's a human asking somebody to do that work, to clean it up and make it more sanitized, it's less likely, I'd say, that you're going to get that feedback from a computer a week later, right? So it's too far away, decoupled from the activity. And that's really the point here, I guess, is that, well, what to do about this problem? So there are 3 potential angles here. Reduce what reaches the table, so more triage, earlier triage potentially. We can ask more reviewers, but I think many people are at capacity and overworked as it is. Or we can think about how we can introduce AI, but the question is where to do that. I guess what I've been trying to say here is that this particular study, this particular conference, the focus was here, right? It was in the during and after, the kind of when you're doing the review or soon afterwards. And I think, and this was the official use of AI tools. Many people, when they're actually doing reviews, probably use AI tools to help them draft that review after they've read the paper, for instance, which is usually accommodated by, say, the ACM guidelines. You can read the review, draft your notes, and then use AI to help filter that. I think, though, all of that is far too late. That's my experience of running a major journal. I think really we need to be focusing here on the initial triage filtering process. I think that's where the biggest potential is for these tools to work. And this does actually align quite interestingly with plans afoot within the CHI community. I was just talking with Regan before coming down here. And, you know, this has been published a couple of weeks ago. And this key idea here of screening, or what's the phrase here, implementing rubric-based assisted desk rejects. Essentially, what that means is sorting the table out a little bit more. And this is the key point, that when we're overproducing, let's put aside for one moment this idea that some dishes may be better than others, i.e. some papers might be better than others, what really deserves to be there. The point is, if everything was good, if everything was amazing, the fact that we are overproducing this much means that we can't make sense of it. There's too much being produced here, and so we need strategies and processes to help kind of manage our attention, for better of a word. And the consequences is if we don't do this. So already, you know, I heard many people having a bit of a moan as they reviewed papers that were submitted to CHI this year, and saying that many of the references or many of the papers that are cited in the submitted papers are no longer citing published papers. They're primarily citing preprints, right? So this is like a big step change that's taking place. And I'm putting up this paper for 2 reasons. So this was picked up by The Economist, a major newspaper, and they reported on this paper how AI is breaking cover letters. It's applied to people finding jobs, and they've got this great data, and they show how basically people are applying using these tools, more people apply more rapidly, and everyone loses, basically. It's a tragedy of the commons. What I love about this is it not only sends a clear message about the perils of this overproduction problem, but critically, this work was not published. It is not peer-reviewed. It was ran in a major international newspaper. It won the highlight that many people in this room are chasing, getting my paper in the media, right? Fame and glory, getting a job, etc. And it wasn't even peer-reviewed. It was just put on a preprint server, and the journalists did their own peer review. They sidestepped peer review. And that's what's at stake here. If we don't get this right, peer review as we know it will just simply disappear, right? It's not guaranteed, because there'll just be other filtering mechanisms that will take place. And I'm going to close out with that famous quote from Herb Simon. What information consumes is rather obvious. It consumes the attention of its recipient. Hence, the wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. We learnt about this 20 years ago with information foraging theory and Paroli and Card's work when the .com thing happened. When you get so much information out there, it's too much for us to handle. We need strategies to better focus our attention. And I think in this era now, when it's so easy to write and produce so many words, that's great. But now the problem becomes how we curate that space. And I think we've got some hard questions to ask. Thank you.
Actually, some of you all feel very passionate about it. Some questions? Yeah. Thanks for your hard work. So, who reviewed and gave a thumbs down to a paper? I feel like I'm always giving thumbs downs to papers and feel bad about it. But part of the problem is on the writing side, is like, is this paper ready to go? And I feel like there's a lot of push to just chuck it in and then make it the reviewer's problem, as opposed to I do the quality control before I submit and say, no, I'm not going to submit this to Kai, I'm going to wait for something else when it's actually done. What can we do to keep people from just throwing the Hail Mary like Bill Bill's fan?
Yeah. So it's funny, I was talking to a colleague about this on the way at the airport. In some ways, it's think of, I don't know, anyone who likes, follows the stuff like buying cryptocurrencies or whatever. You know, it's the movie, everyone's seen the movie The Long Short, right? And there's that scene where they kind of build the Jenga towers and they take the investment portfolios and they fill them with dog shit, right? And they have that whole big scene about the filled with dog shit. They take these AAAs and they load them in with dog shit. And that's what's happening, right? And what happens is what we see what happens in other markets, like the crashes. So Kai is a great example of this, where we're seeing submissions going up and up and up because the perceived value of this paper is great. And all it will take is in, a couple of years' time, we've got 20,000 submissions, and somebody finally won their ticket, which is basically random, because how many people are on the PC at the moment? 1,000 people. So controlling that and having any sense of common narrative of standards of quality is very hard, because it's just too big of a system to manage. So you'll come to the conference, you'll sit there and be like, this isn't very good, because it's basically gone to chance, right? Because this is why action and curation is essential. It's more essential as the volume increases. This idea of, yeah, I think you're right, people just chuck it in and see what happens, because it's a lottery, right? And that's what happens when you get to high volumes and people just making random decisions. But there's real danger there, because it's heading towards a bubble, essentially. That's one argument.
A little bit in line with what colleague was saying also, I was wondering, following your metaphor of the dinner with all of the plates, like what happened, let's think also about why all of these people are submitting all of these plates from the get-go, because it is about the quickness of writing nowadays, but also it's about the academic inflation overall of people having also more access to academia. It's also about the boundaries of HCI, in this case, becoming fuzzy, and then more people from more different disciplines joining. It's also about conditions like for accessing certain jobs or certain positions, you are required to publish, so people also do it out of necessity, right? So there is a lot of reasons behind why this is a problem from the get-go. And there is also a system that uses the number of publications to legitimize your position as a researcher within the circle. So there is a lot of it that is...
Yeah, for sure. This is the thing. What we've done is we've built our own currency. That's why I make the comparison directly to markets, right? Because we have built an artificial currency. We built cryptocurrency and we called it H indexes or citation counts. Right, exactly. I think the comparison is valid in that way. And yeah, you're right. People get these because they are currency, which are portable, right? So they can take them to get jobs and turn into tangible things. Absolutely, 100%. And then the question is, like, we should be learning lessons from how this operates in other sectors, right? You know, how do you control these kind of runs on things, right? Because there is still fundamentally this curation thing, because otherwise the value is like any kind of currency inflation. So then you run the risk of things going south and everyone's losing out, and that's why I kind of point to this paper here, because it sends a cautionary tale, right? The individual is acting rationally. They're applying for jobs, but the net result is that, and sorry, I didn't explain this in full detail. So what happens is more people apply for jobs, essentially. Good quality candidates and bad quality candidates, the employers can no longer tell the difference. So as a result, they just basically start picking people at chance. The downside of that is that people that are actually good now can't command a higher salary, so it pushes down. So try to do the comments, essentially. I should have explained that more carefully. But so yeah, it's these kind of unintended consequences or systems thinking is very important.
Yeah, so one last question. If, as you suggest, we will introduce AI models in the earlier step, in like filtering, could you also see a danger that because these models are trained to normalize and work on like a standard corpus, that certain outlier papers, like test papers or sort of model groundbreaking work will fall through? And how could we prevent that? We have an idea?
Absolutely. So I think about this a lot, and But the question is, are people just already doing this anyway, right? We've been saying this for a long time, that a published Chi paper looks like a published Chi paper, and it's like I remember being in AC and shepherding in this paper, which I thought was really cool, but it was coming from people outside the community, and it was good work, but you had to take a punt on it and work with them to get it into the format of the standard, because we all have these models, right? You know, it's stereotypes, if you like, for how these things work, and that's just how we work, and it's kind of what we've built in these systems as well, is they operate in the same way. So yeah, you're right, there's an increased risk of that happening, that you'll end up just having people working to fit to a template, and as a result, if it doesn't fit, then it's out. But I'd argue that's already happening anyway, because a lot of people think that way anyhow, right? And going outside the box is difficult, even though we all like to say we like to do it, it's hard.
Okay, I think we've asked.
Thank you.